Yes. Okay. Um, so I hope everybody's having a good day. Like Beth said, this is going to be a pretty cursory overview of public benefits. I'm going to do my best to avoid getting into the weeds, but we will have time for questions at the end. And like Beth mentioned, this is the beginning of a training series that we're doing. So I'm hoping to just kind of whet your appetites for what's to come. And if you have questions, feel free. We'll have them at the end. We're also going to send out a post-training survey where you can ask more questions, and that will actually help us determine what additional trainings will be helpful for you guys as we go through these. So just to begin, so Legal Aid Chicago is a large private nonprofit. We provide free civil legal aid to people with limited incomes, primarily in Cook County. But as we'll get into later, there are some benefits that we help with throughout the state. And we work in all areas of civil legal aid. But I am a public benefits person through and through, and love doing this work. So I'm excited to talk to you about it. Today, we're primarily covering benefits from the Social Security Administration, Medicare, and the VA administration, as well as the Illinois Department of Human Services and Illinois Department of Healthcare and Human Services. For all these benefits, we're going to quickly go over which benefits they administer and who qualifies for them, as well as what to do, what people need to do to qualify and what they get if they get those benefits. Public benefits, though, is like an onion. So when we go over things, it's going to be pretty simple right now, but just know for a lot of these rules, there are exceptions and exceptions to exceptions, and those are the kinds of things that we'll get into in later trainings. You can all see the PowerPoint, by the way, right? Just to check before I get too far into this. Okay, great. So a few things I'd like to let social service people who work in the social services know in particular are just some general tips for applying for public benefits. The overall process for getting benefits is the same, regardless of what kind of benefit you're applying for or who administers that program. It always begins with an application of some sort. Usually that is a formal application that you fill out and submit to whatever agency administers the program that the person is applying for. The agency then confirms eligibility, and then they will issue a written decision stating whether they think the person will get benefits or not and why. And if that person disagrees with that decision, then there's an opportunity to appeal, which means that you're asking the agency to look at the decision again and showing the agency why their original decision was incorrect. Appeals can be filed both if the person was denied or if they just didn't get all of the benefits that they qualify for. And that's actually a lot of the work we do in our office, is just increasing and maximizing the benefits that people are getting. There is no cost to apply for benefits, and there are no negative consequences for applying for benefits that someone doesn't qualify for. We run into a lot of issues with our clients where they don't want to apply for something because they're scared that if they apply and don't qualify, that they're going to be charged a fee or they're going to get in trouble. And that's just not the case. They might be denied, but that's the only negative consequence that will happen. So the only thing they lose is the time they spend in it, and possibly, I mean, there's also the emotional factor of applying and waiting for a decision. There's also no punishment for giving wrong answers to questions, as long as the person applying isn't lying or trying to mislead on purpose. And so often when I'm working with folks, especially who are homeless and don't really know, or if they're non-English speakers and they don't really understand the questions, I usually tell folks, like, do the best you can. And I'll put a note in there even that says, we did the best we could. And the agencies will understand that, and they will work to confirm whether someone is actually eligible for the benefit. The final thing that I really want everyone to understand is that these agencies will lose things. It frequently happens. We've even seen it with some applications that are filed online, where the agency will lose track of the applications. They're processing hundreds and thousands of applications every day, and so things often get lost. And so really implore on the folks who we serve to make sure that they keep copies of everything that they submit, and also to keep proof that they've submitted documents whenever they can. So generally, when applying for benefits, the departments are looking for certain things to determine if someone qualifies. So one is if they meet the non-financial and financial eligibility factors. And so just a few, this was really just pointing out some things where we've seen people get confused about the application process generally. The first is when looking at financial eligibility factors, the departments are looking at gross income, not net income. So if someone, the most common issues we've seen on this are with if they're getting Social Security benefits or unemployment benefits, they might not actually know what their gross income is. They say, well, I get this much that I take home every month. But in reality, the government is taking out taxes and other fees out of their benefits before they submit, before that money is issued to the person applying for benefits. And so just so they know, we really need, the government's going to look at the gross income in most situations. On the flip side, not all income or assets are counted. All of the programs have rules that certain kinds of income and certain kinds of assets will be excluded or exempt. And also some things that they might not consider as income might be treated as income. So for example, in the SSI program, which we'll get into exactly what that is later, but when Social Security is looking at income for terms of SSI, they might also look at whether someone is paying for all of their housing needs and food, and then we'll count part of that as income for the client. The second area here is interviews. Interviews are not required for all programs, but they are required for many. And if it is required that the person participate in an interview, if they fail to participate in a scheduled interview, their application can be denied just for that reason. It has nothing to do with their actual eligibility. And so we try to implore on our clients that if they miss an interview, to just try to ask for it to be rescheduled as soon as possible before their application is denied. All of the programs that I'm speaking about today, if you're able to, if someone misses an interview and you ask for them to reschedule it, they will, as long as it's reasonable. The departments will ask for information about a client situation to confirm eligibility during that eligibility determination section of the application processing. Again, if the departments ask for information and the person doesn't respond, the application can be denied just on that basis, regardless of whether the person is actually eligible. This gets particularly confusing for clients because sometimes the departments will ask for things that the person doesn't understand or they think that doesn't apply to them. And even in those situations, the person applying for benefits should respond. So we've seen a lot of situations where, for example, the Department of Human Services will ask for verification of certain assets that the person doesn't have. And the client might say, well, I don't have that, so I'm not going to do anything about it. But that can result in the application being denied. Whereas if they respond to the department and say, so like, for example, if the department asks for proof of the value of a life insurance plan, and the person says, well, I have a term life insurance plan, it doesn't really have a value on it. If they just let the department know that, then they can go ahead and process the application. If the client doesn't respond at all, then they're going to be denied. And so often it's just involves asking for help and making sure that they understand what the department is asking for and making sure that the department understands what the real situation is. And finally, the area where I work in primarily is when agencies make errors. Like I said, these agencies are processing hundreds, thousands of applications every day. They make errors. And so it's important to review application notices or notices in response to applications when they're received. There are usually deadlines for fighting a decision to argue that it was incorrect. And so it's important to read those decisions and understand what they mean, so that you can know if you want to file an appeal. Okay. So we're going to dive right into talking about some of the benefits programs. Again, we're going to go through these pretty quickly, and my goal here is just to give you an overview. So the Social Security Administration, I think most of you are probably familiar with the idea of Social Security benefits. But you might not know that the Social Security benefits actually encompasses a really wide range of programs that all have different requirements for who qualifies, and they have different benefit amounts. They also have different ways of applying. And that's where we see a lot of people get hung up, is that they apply for one program and they really meant to apply for a different program. And so they get really confused when they get denied. So these first 3 programs, that little red line, these are called Title II programs. And if someone qualifies for one of them, they can get that one. If they qualify for 2 of them, they'll just get the one that has the higher value amount. So the first, which I think probably most people are familiar with, is retirement. To qualify for retirement, someone has to be at least 62 years old. The way retirement works is the amount of money you get depends on how old you are when you apply. So 62 is kind of the bottom level of that. That would be the least amount of monthly benefits that the person would qualify for. And then it will increase as the person gets older. Based on the application dates. If you apply at 62, you'd get less every month for the rest of your life, whereas if you apply at 67, you would get a higher amount for the rest of your life. It's also based on the number of work credits you've received and how much money you made. So the maximum amount that someone received in 2023 was $4,555 a month. Most people don't get that. The average amount that people will get on retirement in 2023 was a little under $2,000. And to apply for retirement, they can apply online. And I put the link on here. We're going to send these slides out later. So there's a lot of text on these slides. We created them so that they'll be a resource for you later. So you'll get them and it'll have all the links. I'm going to skip disability for a second and go down to survivors. So survivors benefits is a program that a lot of people actually don't know about. It's the qualifications are a little complicated, but just know it's for surviving spouses and ex-spouses, parents and children who might not otherwise qualify for the other 2. They might not qualify for retirement or disability. And so it's based on the work record of the person who is deceased. So if one spouse worked, let's think of the old-fashioned, you have, one spouse working and the other spouse not working their whole lives. The spouse who didn't work won't qualify for retirement or disability because they don't have enough of a work record. And so, but if their spouse who was the worker passes away, they might qualify for survivors benefits. So the average for those aligns kind of with retirement. The maximum was in 2023 was $4,555. The average was considerably less. There is no online application for survivors. You have to call Social Security or go into the local office to apply. So, okay, I'm going to pop back up to disability. Disability is one that I know when I was working directly with a lot of people who are homeless, I worked a lot of disability cases. Disability is, to qualify for disability, a person has to have one or more conditions that together prevent them from engaging in substantial gainful employment, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. And they have to have earned enough work credits to qualify. The maximum in 2023 was $3,627. And again, the average benefit was much lower than that. To apply for those benefits, people can apply online at that website. SSI is related to disability, but quite different. So if a person can get retirement, disability, or survivors, if they're getting a low amount on any of those 3 programs, they might also qualify for a certain amount of SSI. So you can get disability and SSI at the same time, but you have to apply for both. You can potentially get both at the same time. So SSI has the same disability standard as Social Security disability. Someone has to have one or more conditions that prevent them from engaging in substantial gainful employment, or they have to be legally blind under Social Security's rules, or they have to be over 65 years old. So any one of those 3 categories can qualify for SSI. The maximum benefit in 2023 was $914 a month. Most people get somewhere around that, but there are certain reasons why that might be reduced. And so the average benefit in 2023 was only $657. This is where we see a lot of confusion. You cannot apply for SSI online. I see a lot of people applying for Social Security disability online, and they think they've applied for SSI as well. And you can't apply for SSI online. There's a question in the disability application that says, do you want to also apply for SSI? And in that case, the department is supposed to contact the person who said they want to apply for SSI and help process that application. But because it requires that second contact and because there's a lot of confusion about what's going on there, often that doesn't happen. So something to just kind of look out for. And again, we can go into that later. I know that there's a lot of SOAR folks on here. Yay, SOAR folks. And so happy to talk to you guys more about some of that if you have questions. So you can start an application for SSI online, but again, all that's going to do is alert the department that you want to apply, and I won't go into preserve it. It'll preserve the filing date, and those of you who do SOAR will know what that means, and those of you who don't, we'll talk about it at a later date. This is my layout of the Social Security Administration application process, and it goes in a weird shape here because the application bounces around for 2 different agencies. So it starts with the Social Security Administration. Those are those first 2. So the client or the person should complete the SSI and SSD applications, and then Social Security determines if they have enough work credits for Social Security disability. If they do, or if they don't, at that point, Social Security might send them a letter saying that they don't have enough work credits for Social Security disability. That can be really confusing for a lot of clients. And if I see clients get those, then I really want to look to make sure that they also applied for SSI, because if they did also apply for SSI, then their application still should be moving through the process. If they only apply for Social Security disability, that's going to be the end. And then we got to figure out what to do about that. But if they were found to have enough work credits for Social Security disability, or if they also applied for SSI, the case then gets transferred to DDS. So it pops down here and back up here, and then we're in DDS. This is a state agency. DDS is responsible for determining whether someone meets Social Security's definition for disability. So DDS will send more documents to the client to sign and fill out. The client returns those. DDS might also ask for what's called consultative exams. Those are medical and psychiatric exams done by medical and psychiatric professionals who are paid by the Social Security Administration to do these things. Once DDS has what it believes is enough information to make a decision, it will determine whether it thinks the person has a disability, and then it will return the case to Social Security to issue a decision on whether the person is eligible for benefits. In Illinois, this entire process takes approximately 9 months right now. And so it is a long process during which a person, because they are, by definition, too disabled to work, likely have very little or no income. I'll just leave that like that. The Social Security appeals process is long, and it can be a little bit confusing. So this is just my visual representation of it. I really, in most situations, would encourage people to consider filing appeals if their initial applications are denied. So if a person denied, they wait 9 months, they get a decision. Only about 30% of the applications at that point are approved. At that point, if someone disagrees with the decision, they do think that they have a disability that prevents them from working, they can request reconsideration. That means that the case goes back to DDS, but it's looked at by somebody else, and you have the opportunity at that point to submit more medical records and more arguments for why you think you're disabled. Some decisions are reversed at that point, many are not. If someone is denied after reconsideration, they have the opportunity to request an administrative hearing. That is where there's a lot, the approval numbers grow a lot at the administrative hearing level, because that is a person's opportunity to talk to a judge personally about why they think that they are too disabled to work. And at that point, Social Security should have, or if they're working with someone to help them with the case, or if they're doing it on their own, you've really submitted a lot of medical records. And so they have a lot more information about the person, and the judge gets a better understanding of what's going on. And so it takes a long time, though, to get there. And so, again, just like a shout out to you SOAR folks who are helping people get approved at that first application step, that's fantastic. Because by the time, if you file an application and get through the administrative hearing, you're 2 to 3 years in with no income. So it's really important. And again, we'll do some more stuff about the application things and some tips that we know that aren't necessarily part of the SOAR training. We'll get to that in later trainings. If someone is denied by the appeals at the administrative hearing, they can file for another level of administrative appeal, which is called the Appeals Council. I won't go into what that is. We used to call it the black hole in Virginia because it takes forever to get anything processed there. Sometimes cases can get reversed there, and if you lose at the Appeals Council, you have the opportunity to go to federal court. An important note on Social Security, because it's different than some of the other benefits programs. If you apply, every time you make a decision to file an appeal or not, you're not allowed to submit a new application and have that application processed until you've made it through the Appeals Council level. So there is some I've had a lot of clients who are homeless who we helped file an application and then they were denied. And I said, well, look, we can go through this administrative process and I can get you more money that way, potentially, but you're going to have to wait. Or we can just submit a new application. We can drop this application, file a new application, and we're going to have a really strong case at the application level. And I would really have to let them decide, do I need this money sooner or can I wait longer to get what I really deserve? And that can be a really hard decision for folks to make. So just something to be aware of. Okay. We put Medicare here because it kind of goes with Social Security. So Medicare is a health insurance program, also administered by the federal government. That little thing that just flew onto the screen, that's a sample Medicare card. Sometimes the clients don't know if they have Medicare or Medicaid, so we'll refer to it as, do you have a red, white, and blue card? That's the Medicare card. To qualify for Medicare, someone must be 65 years or older. There's supposed to be a little space there. If they're receiving Social Security, the space in the wrong place. So it's people 65 years and older, space. People receiving Social Security disability, but only after a 2-year waiting period, and that's based on the date of initial disability. Or people with end-stage renal disease or Lou Gehrig's disease can qualify for Medicare. Medicare can be really confusing and it can be really costly, and I wanted to make sure you all understood that. So Medicare, there's 4 parts of Medicare. Part A covers hospital costs. Part B covers doctor's visits. Skip Part C. Part D is prescription care. That's traditional Medicare. Some people might choose that. Another option that people have is to do Part C. Part C is actually just combining parts A and B and sometimes also parts D. And that is paid for, you get your Medicare instead of from the federal government, you get it through a private insurance company. Another quick aside that I didn't put on here, there's also a thing called Medigap. Medigap is separate from Medicare, and sometimes folks get confused about what they have. Medigap is a supplement for people who have traditional Medicare. So someone might have Part A, B, and D regular Medicare, and then they say, well, I'm going to get this other, pay a private company to help me pay for the costs of those services, and also sometimes they throw in dental or something like that. So there's kind of two different things where people on Medicare might be involved with the private health insurance companies. Monthly costs can be really exorbitant. Part A is free to most people, but if someone doesn't have enough work history, they can pay up to $506 a month for Part A Medicare. Part B ranges from $165 to $560 a month. And Part C because you're paying for Part A and B, plus you're paying a little bit for this private health insurance company to manage your plan. And then Part D for the prescriptions, you're paying for a plan, like you pick a plan, just like you would pick your health plans that, like, you know, when you're deciding which one meets your needs. So you pick your plan and then there's an additional cost. So it can be extremely expensive if you're having to pay for all of that. We'll get into some cost helps that come up with these programs later. To apply for Medicare, there's the website, or you can go to the Social Security Administration. If someone is on Social Security disability, or if they're getting some sort of Social Security benefit at the time they turn 65, they're usually automatically enrolled. Just so you know. Okay. Oh, did we take off? All right. So there are, I think we lost our slides on the Medicare savings programs. So there's a few different options for helping to pay for Medicare costs, and these were in the surveys, and I saw that many of you hadn't heard of these. So we can do more trainings on these later as well. But one is called Extra Help. Extra Help is a program that's available from the Social Security Administration for people who are low income, and that helps cover their Part D premiums. So Extra Help can be a huge help. It helps pay both for the premiums, so the premium cost and the monthly cost, and it can help pay for out-of-pocket costs on prescriptions. So that can be a huge help for people who are having to pay, who are needing to access prescription drug coverage. The other option is the Medicare savings programs. That is through the state of Illinois. The Medicare savings programs can be a little bit complicated, but they will help cover there's 3 Medicare savings programs in the state of Illinois. They all cover the Part B costs. If someone is earning less than 100% of the federal poverty line, it'll also cover 100% of the Part A costs if someone has it. So that's a huge benefit for someone who is on SSI and over 65. And that's where we're seeing a lot of underutilization of these programs. A lot of folks think that when they turn 65, if they don't have enough work history, that they can't qualify for Medicare, and that's not true. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that there's health equity issues for older Americans because people without work history or with less paying jobs in the past aren't able to access the Medicare program. And therefore, they're not able to access the wide range of doctors and specialists that they can access through Medicare, because Medicaid has a smaller number of doctors who they can access. So we've been working in our office to try to help people who are over 65 and on SSI, if they're interested, access Medicare using the Medicare savings plans. It's probably a little bit deeper than Beth wanted me to go, but it's okay. I'm flying through here a little bit. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not losing everybody. I am going to transition to the state programs. Some of these you might be more familiar with and others you might not. We categorize them like this. There's a food assistance program called SNAP, which I'm assuming most of you know about. There's also medical assistance through Medicaid, which I think most of you know about, but some of you might not know some of the quirks that make it really fun for us attorneys. And then there's 3 cash programs, which currently are being highly underutilized in the state of Illinois. And so I want to make sure that you know about those and what a big impact they can have on the lives of the folks we serve. So first, SNAP. The income limits for SNAP depend on whether a person in the household receiving SNAP benefits is 60 years old or older or has a disability. If anyone in the household is over 60 or has a disability, the income limit for SNAP is 200% of the federal poverty line. So that's in October, starting this month, 2,430 for a single person. If the person doesn't have a disability, then the income limit drops to 165% of the federal poverty line. There is no asset limit for SNAP in Illinois, and the benefit amount varies depending on how many people are in the household together, and then also on how much income they have and how much and certain kinds of expenses they have. During the pandemic, SNAP was a little bit different. Everyone who was enrolled in the SNAP program during the pandemic was getting the maximum amount of SNAP benefits that they could just based on their household size. And so it didn't matter if a person had any income, and then the expenses were just kind of irrelevant to the calculation because they weren't looking at income. Starting earlier this year, they reinstated these rules. And I know that there was a lot of confusion with folks because their SNAP benefits suddenly dropped. And in some of those situations, it was correct. In other situations, it might have been because, in part because they hadn't updated their information with the Department of Human Services during the pandemic, because it hadn't been a pressing need to report that their income had dropped, or that they had a new person. Well, if they had a new person in the household, they should have reported it. But if they had their income dropped, or if their housing expenses changed, they might not have reported that to the department. And so one thing that we've been trying to work on with is making sure that people are getting all of the expenses, in particular, that they're getting the credits for all of those they qualify for. SNAP benefits can only be used for unprepared foods. That's the federal rule. Illinois has some exemptions for that. It's called the SNAP Restaurant Meals Pilot. It's only available in certain parts of the state right now, but anyone who is homeless or who is on Social Security benefits should qualify for this. And it allows them to use their SNAP at certain locations to get prepared meals. I think there's 10 restaurants now. There might be more. I feel like it keeps going up around the state. DHS is planning a big expansion of this that we're really excited about. I think it's going to make a huge difference for people who are unhoused, because they'll be able to get hot food and prepared meals. And so just keep a lookout for that. And so just get my notes. The other rule that changed during the pandemic was that college students, pre-pandemic and now, it's very hard for college students to qualify for SNAP. There's only certain exemption. They have to meet certain exemptions. And so you might see families that have college students in them where either the college student is no longer eligible for SNAP, or in some situations, the entire family becomes ineligible for SNAP. I know prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of advocacy around decreasing college student hunger. And I don't know what's gone on with that, because it kind of, lost momentum with the pandemic, but we'll see what happens. Another kind of hot issue with SNAP right now is that across the country, we're seeing a wide rash of people having SNAP benefits stolen. And so just know that if someone reports to you that their SNAP benefits, their cards are being skimmed at places where they use the cards. And under federal rules now, the state can reimburse people if their SNAP benefits are stolen. And so we can send out a link on that. It's pretty easy. The state's been really great about it. So, but if you have questions about it, we can talk about it later. Okay, to the cash programs. TANF cash, this is probably the one that most people are most familiar with. This is traditional welfare. It's designed to help support minor children who are living with a relative caretaker. So usually that's like a grandparent or a single parent. It's a relatively small cash benefit. The program can be really complicated and hard to navigate because it requires people to agree to a work and training plan, but it can be really helpful for people who need it. So there's no asset limit. The income limits are, it's this like big algorithm. It's too hard to describe here, but basically, if someone's getting more than the max, if someone's earning more than the maximum benefit, then they're probably ineligible. So I just threw in here that the maximum for a family of 4 in October of 2023 is $875 a month. Currently, child support payments also count as income to the family receiving TANF, but state law on that changed recently, and we're waiting for that those rules to go into effect. I believe there's currently a public comment period on those benefits or on that change. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can look for that. AABD Cash is my baby. I love this program. Okay, so AABD Cash is a cash benefits program from the state, primarily for people who are over 65 years old or people who meet Social Security's definition of disabled. So going back to that definition from earlier, unable to maintain substantial gainful employment for at least 12 months. Most people are either receiving SSI because they meet that definition and they're really low income. You can actually still qualify for it potentially if you're earning over the SSI amount. But sometimes you have to show that you at least applied for SSI and got denied because you have to maximize all other income sources to qualify. This program is great for helping make up the difference when someone has overpayments with the Social Security Administration or if they're paying child support obligations. It can make a huge difference. It also makes a big difference if you have a couple where one person's on SSI and the other person has other income. So again, the way that this is calculated is wild. That's part of why I like personally like navigating this program, but it is not easy for people to navigate on their own. There is no set income limit. There's a lot of math that's done to figure out if someone's eligible or not. The benefit amount on average is $60 to $70 a month. But if you fit into one of these, if you have overpayments or child support obligations, or if you have a certain kind of disability that prevents you from using stairs or are blind, the benefit amount can be much higher. I just won a case last week where we increased the AABD Cash by $800 a month. So now she's getting $850 a month from this program. So the amount that you can get is wide. There's no income limit, but you have to use this like complicated math formula. The final cash program that we wanted to talk about is BTTC. This is for non-citizen victims of trafficking, torture, or other serious crimes. So U-Visa, I put them down here, but it's basically U-Visa, T-Visa, or asylum associated people who don't qualify for the federal programs. Again, there's no asset limit in Illinois, and the amount you get is pretty small. It's only about $106 a month. But that can make, again, a big difference to someone who has no other income. So moving on to Medicaid. Medicaid is, I think, as most of you know, a health insurance program. It helps pay for hospital costs. It can pay for long-term care if that's needed. It can help pay for prescription drugs, doctor's visits, all the healthcare needs. I'm not going to go through each of these programs in the interest of time. But there's a lot of different categories. You have to figure out if someone qualifies, you have to see which category they fit into and then look at the income limits. One thing to note though, there's only an asset limit for this this third column down, Medicare beneficiaries, US citizens, most LPRs under 65. For that group, just that one, Medicare beneficiaries and US citizens under 65. Oh wait, who have disabilities. Sorry, this is not right. It should be Medicare beneficiaries, US citizens, and LPRs over 65 is what that should say. There's an income limit of 100% of the federal poverty line, and there's this asset limit, which was recently increased by a lot by the department, which is fantastic. If someone fits into that, they're a Medicare beneficiary or they're a US citizen or LPR over 65, but they don't meet those limits, they can also qualify for this thing called spend down, which means if they spend a certain amount of money every month on medical expenses, they can still qualify for Medicare. And that can make a really big difference for someone who has really high medical costs and doesn't qualify for other programs. Okay. So applying for DHS benefits, we usually encourage people to do it online because there's a good paper trail. For someone who is homeless, it's sometimes best to just go to the local office and apply and ask to do the interview if one is required the same day. We see a lot of people who are homeless, unable to navigate these programs because they missed the interview, or unable to get their benefits approved because they missed the interview. But you can ask them to do it the same day in the office if someone is homeless. And they'll need to have some sort of proof of ID. It doesn't have to be a state ID, but some sort of proof of ID. If they have social security numbers for everyone in the household, proof of immigration status, and proof of income. That's a big one for the last 30 days. Okay, sorry, I'm running out of time. So again, this is the same kind of, the process is similar to what I mentioned earlier. There's an application. They determine eligibility by doing an interview if it's a SNAP or cash program. And then asking for documents to prove the facts to show that someone is eligible, and then they'll issue a notice of decision. It should take 5 to 45 days at most. We are seeing much slower processing with the VTTC cases, just so you know, if you're working with migrants. If you're working with migrants and not already connected to the working group that's working on this the VTTC benefits statewide, please reach out to me and let me know, and I can connect you to that group. There's already a group that's looking at some of the problems with that program. When you're appealing, you can appeal a DHS decision. There's a few different grounds than on the Social Security application decisions. You can appeal an incorrect decision. You can also appeal what's called an inaction. So if DHS, I'm going to flip back. So there's these processing times for processing applications. If DHS doesn't make a decision within those timeframes, which sometimes happens, you can actually file an appeal to kind of get the application moving. Sometimes that's necessary to get a case moving. Unfortunately, particularly if like the case ends up in like the wrong office, sometimes you just have to file an appeal to get it moved to the right office. And then also you can appeal decisions where benefits are denied because of a missing interview or missing verifications. So even if it was correct that the application was denied because of a missed interview or failure to submit verifications, you can still file an appeal and then get a new interview scheduled or submit the verifications that were required before. But you're only going to be successful in that appeal if the person doing that it cooperates with all of those things. Here's the deadlines for filing appeals, and then here's just some links for how to file the appeal. We usually file online if we can. Sometimes I'll just email this email, dhs.bah. Mostly because I like to have things in writing, so I don't usually do stuff on the phone. Okay, I put some slides on here on VA pension. So I think there's a few people on here who are associated with the VA. VA pension is, I would say, I'm going to go quickly through this. This is sort of similar to an SSI program, right? It's a means tested program. It's designed to help veterans who are living in poverty to have some sort of income if they can't work. So there's a similar sort of disability standard. It's slightly different for VA as it is for SSI or SSD. Or if they're 65 or older, they can qualify. They have to have served during wartime, which is defined by the VA. We have been at war since, what was it? When did the Iraq war start, in the 90s? So many people now are going to, many more people now are going to qualify for this. I haven't done VA benefits in a while, but all my guys were Korea people, and a lot of them didn't meet that wartime standard. It was very frustrating. So this is like a disability program for veterans if they meet all of the requirements. There's a second veterans program, service connected compensation. This is more akin to like a workers' comp program. So this is saying that I served in the military and then I had some sort of injury that occurred when I was in the military, and now I'm asking for workers' comp. It is, however, different than workers' comp because the injury doesn't actually have to be related to the service. It just has to have happened during service. So even if it happened while they were on leave, I think the classic example is like someone comes home and they're on leave, but they're in service and they get into a really bad car accident. Like that theoretically could lead to a VA service connected compensation claim. There has to be a nexus between current symptoms the person is experiencing and whatever it is that happened in service. These can be really complicated. We're primarily doing these kinds of cases if someone has a less than favorable discharge status, because that can add some special complications as well. But anyway, just so you know that's there. Oh my gosh, I made it through. I saw hands flying up at certain points. I told Beth we'd get through everything before we got to questions. So, but if anybody has anything, I will try to answer them now.
I'm going to do my best here because we've got almost 400 people in this training.
Oh my gosh.
So
thank you. That is a lot.
Can I go ahead and unmute people? Go a little bit out of planned. All right, Nicholas, you're up.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much for hosting. This was very informative. My name's Nick. I'm with the Economic Justice Policy Analyst with Access Living. I actually have a question about the VA service connected compensation. Does PTSD count?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, it has to meet whatever the standards are in the manual. But yeah. Oh, Beth, you're muted. You're muted, Beth.
Oh my God. Lisa Jurgensen, I apologize if I did not pronounce your name correctly. Lisa. Okay, we're gonna have to move on. I'm gonna go. Okay. So, hey, Jackson, did you have a question? I've unmuted your mic.
Just wondering if it's true that once a person applies for SSI or disability, that during the wait time, they cannot work?
It's not, that's not true. The issue is whether, so Social Security is going to know that they're working. It's going to find out that they're working and they should be reporting that they're working. And so that's going to just become a fact that's considered in their application. So to prove that you have to qualify for Social Security, disability, or SSI, you have to prove that you have a disability that prevents you from working full time at substantial gainful employment for at least 12 months. So if you're working part-time and not making much money, that's fine, but you're going to have to be able to explain to the Social Security Administration why that is. And so sometimes what I would do is get notes from the employers to say, this person is working here. I couldn't hire them for more than this because I can tell that they can't do any more than this. Notes from employers are fantastic on Social Security claims if they're helpful. Because Social Security will give them a lot of weight. But no, they can work. It's just, it goes to whether they are eligible or not. And I would usually encourage my clients to work, because I would say on one hand, you might make more money in the end. Like maybe it turns out you can work and that's great. Or it's going to turn out that you're going to try this and it's not going to work. And then that's actually proves that you have a disability that prevents you from working.
Okay. So can I follow that up? Because I get a lot of clients who are seeking rent assistance and they're coming to me because they're waiting on disability and they can't work. And so I have to turn them down, of course, because they have no income. So while they're waiting, they're not paying rent, which is a problem, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. And I don't know in that capacity how you'd be able to help them navigate that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, not more help there.
Okay, next up is Chris O'Hara. Unmuted your mic, Chris.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, we can.
Yeah, I tried to use the chat earlier 2 or 3 times and it rejected me, so that's the only reason why I did this. I just wanted to ask more or less when it came to people that are getting the hot meals possibility for a pilot, is it only for like seniors or is it going to be for people that may have housing instability that may have a
Yeah.
tough time going to some places where not every place is going to let you buy it and then cook it for you. So I'm just wondering what factors are going to be considered in that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have the full list in front of me, but it does include people who meet SNAP's definition of homelessness, which is more broad than HUD's definition of homelessness, for those of you who know what I'm talking about. But it includes people who are unstably housed, as well as people who are unsheltered. The tricky part is making sure that DHS is identifying them correctly, because the card has to be coded. They don't get a separate card. It's like in their system, it has to get turned on. And so as this expands, I think that us advocates are going to have to work with the Department of Human Services to make sure that our clients are in the system the right way so they can access hot food. Yeah. Beth, you're muted again.
Okay, all right. Next question, Todd Shah. I have unmuted your mic.
Hello, Todd Scher from Housing Forward. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thanks for taking my question. My question is, why would reapplying for SSI change the amount of one's reward as opposed to going to the appeals process when the initial date of disability doesn't change, only the filing date changes?
Right. So for SSI, the beginning of disability is based on the date you apply. It doesn't begin for SSI purposes, it doesn't matter when your disability began. Eligibility starts the month after you applied. So
Okay,
Social
yeah,
Security
that's what I
disability,
thought.
it's a little bit different, but you can still only go back 12 months from the application date.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
All right, Gordon, or TJ Gordon, sorry, you're up next.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is TJ Gordon speaking, he, his pronouns. And I do have a question about a particular disability requirements for both state benefits as well as SSI as well. How would autism fit into the disability definition, regardless of if I'm one part of the spectrum or the other? And I'm finding out, even for myself, is that because though I have a lifelong disability, it's hard for me to get services because of what I can do in my degrees, but not looking at why I'm not able to work in a competitive manner.
Yeah, that's a great and very big question. Unfortunately, I only have time to give you a very short and cursory answer. But if you want to reach out to me later, I can give you more guidance. I'll say that Social Security, and we can go into this in more detail some other time. It uses this 5-step process. The 3rd step and the 5th step are the ones that matters. For the 3rd step, which is really hard for a lot of people to get through, it has this listing where it's literally like a list of what the disabilities are and what symptoms Social Security is looking for, right? That one is often hard, particularly for people in the situation that you're describing. Step 5 of the system says you can't do any jobs, right? That's the one that usually, in order to win on step 5, you almost always have to go to the administrative law judge level, because that involves a conversation with a vocational expert, where, like, as an attorney arguing for my clients, I would say, well, my client can't hold a job full time because they have difficulty doing whatever, paying attention for long periods of time, or understanding instructions, or whatever. Like we come up with what these arguments are, and then we have to show that the medical records support it. I mean, that's kind of the shortish answer. But it can usually, if it's not, often at times, if it's not a disability that we can prove at step 3, it often takes going through that whole 2-3 year process to get to the administrative law judge so that we can show them why you really can't do any work.
I will definitely email you by the end of the day. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right, it looks like that's all we have time for today, folks. Thank you all for joining us for this training, first in the series. As we mentioned before, we look forward to joining you. November 29th will be the next training. If you have any questions, I still see we have people with hands up. Please, please, please reach out to us. We're obsessed with public benefits. You're never going to find anyone that loves them as much as me. But again, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you at the end of November for our next training in the
One
series.
last thing, there's going to be a survey that goes out soon. So if you could please fill that out, I'd really appreciate it. We're going to use the input from that to improve later trainings, but also to come up with the training topics. So we're hoping to make this series, we're going to do this at least once a month, and I'd like to actually provide training that you want. So that would be really helpful.